Hello. If you enjoyed the story, leave your comment, give it a like and subscribe. Thank you very much. God bless you. I've worked at Miller's Pharmacy for 8 years now and I thought I'd seen everything. The usual rush of customers picking up prescriptions, the occasional insurance hassle, the elderly folks counting pennies for their medications. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened on that rainy Tuesday afternoon in October. It was around 2:30 p.m. when she walked in. An older woman, probably in her 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a simple bun and wearing a worn but clean floral dress. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached my counter, clutching a prescription bottle and a crumpled piece of paper. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to refill this prescription for my husband." I took the bottle from her shaking hands. Insulin. The label showed it was for Robert Martinez, and the prescription was indeed due for a refill. I scanned the barcode and pulled up the information on my computer screen. "All right, Mrs. Martinez, that'll be $340 for a month's supply," I said routinely, not looking up from my screen. The silence that followed was deafening. When I finally looked up, I saw tears streaming down her face. Her lips were quivering and she was clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles had turned white. I don't have that much," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I only have $47. Please, isn't there something you can do? My husband, he needs this medicine. Without it, he could go into a diabetic coma." The desperation in her voice hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd dealt with insurance issues before, but this was different. This was raw human desperation. I could see the fear in her eyes, not just worry, but genuine terror about what might happen to her husband without his medication. I stared at Mrs. Martinez for a moment, trying to process what I was seeing. In all my years working at the pharmacy, I'd never encountered someone in such desperate straits. The computer screen showed her insurance had lapsed, which explained the full retail price. "Ma'am, let me check if there are any discount programs available," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. But deep down I knew the options were limited. The manufacturer's discount program had a waiting period, and the state assistance program had a months-long approval process. Mrs. Martinez wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse. "I'm sorry for crying," she said, embarrassed. "It's just that Robert and I were both on fixed income. Social Security barely covers our rent and utilities. Last month our car broke down and we had to choose between fixing it and buying his medicine. We chose the car because he needs to get to his dialysis appointments." My heart sank. Dialysis appointments? This man wasn't just diabetic, he had kidney failure too. The insulin wasn't just important, it was literally keeping him alive. "We've been married for 52 years, she continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke about her husband. "Robert worked construction his whole life, built houses for other families to live in. He never complained, never asked for handouts. But now..." Her voice trailed off. I looked around the pharmacy. My manager, Mr. Peterson, was in his office with the door closed, probably dealing with paperwork. The other customers seemed oblivious to the drama unfolding at my counter. It felt like Mrs. Martinez and I were in our own little bubble of crisis. "How long has it been since his last dose?" I asked quietly. 3 days, she whispered. "He's been rationing what little he had left, taking half doses. But this morning he could barely get out of bed. His blood sugar was over 400. The weight of Mrs. Martinez's words settled on my shoulders like a heavy blanket. 3 days without proper insulin, blood sugar over 400. Robert Martinez was in serious danger. I'd seen enough medical emergencies in my years at the pharmacy to know that this situation could turn fatal quickly. I glanced at the clock. 2:45 p.m. The pharmacy would close at 9 p.m., and tomorrow was Wednesday, Robert's dialysis day, according to what his wife had mentioned. If he didn't get his insulin today, he might not make it to his appointment. "Mrs. Martinez, have you tried calling your doctor's office? Sometimes they have samples," I suggested, though I knew it was a long shot. She nodded sadly. "I called this morning. Dr. Williams' office said they're all out of samples, and they can't see Robert until next week for a new prescription evaluation. They told me to go to the emergency room if it gets worse." The emergency room. I knew what that meant for people like the Martinezes. Hours of waiting, hundreds of dollars in bills they couldn't afford, and probably just enough insulin to get through a day or two before facing the same problem again. I looked at the prescription bottle in my hand, then at Mrs. Martinez's tear-stained face. Company policy was clear: no medication without payment. But looking at this woman, seeing the genuine fear and desperation in her eyes, policy suddenly seemed like just words on paper. "Let me talk to my manager," I said, though I already knew what Mr. Peterson would say. He was a good man, but he ran the pharmacy by the book. Insurance companies, corporate policies, profit margins. These were the realities of modern healthcare that left people like Robert Martinez falling through the cracks. As I walked toward the manager's office, I passed the insulin refrigerator. Dozens of vials sat there, each one potentially life-saving, each one locked behind corporate policies and insurance red tape. The irony wasn't lost on me. We had the medicine that could save Robert Martinez's life, but a number on a computer screen was preventing him from getting it. I knocked on Mr. Peterson's door, my heart pounding. Through the glass, I could see him hunched over his desk, surrounded by invoices and insurance forms. When he looked up and saw my face, his expression immediately grew concerned. "What's wrong, Sarah?" he asked, gesturing for me to sit down. I explained Mrs. Martinez's situation, watching his face grow more troubled with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. "Sarah, you know I wish we could help everyone who walks through that door," he said. "But we're not a charity. We have bills to pay, employees to support, and corporate policies to follow. If we started giving away medication, we'd be out of business in a month." I understood his position, but understanding didn't make it any easier to accept. "Mr. Peterson, this man could die without his insulin. Isn't there anything we can do?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the framed photo of his own family on his desk. "The best I can offer is a payment plan. She could pay what she has now and the rest over time." I knew it wasn't enough. Mrs. Martinez had made it clear that $47 was all she had, and there was no indication that their financial situation would improve anytime soon. A payment plan was just delaying the inevitable. Walking back to the counter, I felt defeated. Mrs. Martinez was still standing there, hope flickering in her eyes as she saw me approach. Behind her, the pharmacy continued its normal rhythm: customers picking up prescriptions, phones ringing, the mundane business of healthcare continuing while a woman's husband faced a life-threatening crisis. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Martinez," I began, but the words felt like ash in my mouth. "My manager says we can offer you a payment plan, but you still need the full amount eventually," she finished, her shoulders sagging. "I understand. Thank you for trying." She turned to leave and something inside me snapped. I couldn't let her walk out that door knowing what would happen to her husband. "Wait," I called out, my voice louder than I intended. Mrs. Martinez stopped and turned back, along with several other customers who looked up from their phones and magazines. My hands were shaking as I reached into my purse underneath the counter. 8 years of working at this pharmacy, 8 years of watching people struggle with medication costs, 8 years of feeling helpless, it all led to this moment. "Mrs. Martinez, I want to pay for your husband's insulin," I said, pulling out my credit card. The pharmacy fell silent. Even the phone seemed to stop ringing. Mrs. Martinez stared at me in shock, her mouth opening and closing without any words coming out. "You can't do that," she finally whispered. "That's $340. You don't even know us." "You're right, I don't know you," I said, swiping my card through the reader. "But I know what it's like to worry about someone you love. I know what it's like to feel helpless when the system fails the people who need it most." As I processed the transaction, I thought about my own grandmother who had passed away 5 years earlier. She'd struggled with medication costs too, rationing her heart medication to make it last longer. I'd been in college then, working part-time, unable to help her the way I wished I could. Maybe this was my chance to honor her memory. "But why?" Mrs. Martinez asked, tears streaming down her face again. But these were different tears now. I handed her the bag with her husband's insulin, and that's when I made the revelation that shocked everyone in the pharmacy, including myself. "Because Mrs. Martinez," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart, "your husband Robert built the house I grew up in. Martinez Construction. I remember seeing that sign in our front yard when I was 7 years old. Your husband gave my family a home. Today I'm just returning the favor." The silence that followed was profound. Mrs. Martinez clutched the medication to her chest, sobbing openly now. Other customers had gathered around, some wiping away their own tears. Even Mr. Peterson had emerged from his office, having heard the commotion. But the biggest shock was yet to come. As Mrs. Martinez hugged me tightly, whispering "thank you" over and over, Mr. Peterson stepped forward. "Sarah," he said quietly, "put that medication cost on the pharmacy's community assistance account. And Mrs. Martinez? Your husband's insulin will be covered by our store's charitable program from now on. No one should have to choose between medicine and living. Sometimes, it takes one act of kindness to remind us all of our humanity."